This is Fractured Fidelity, true stories about trust, betrayal, and the moments that quietly change everything. This story is told from the perspective of the person who lived it. I agreed to an open marriage. I didn't realize it had already started. I've been with my wife for over 15 years. We started dating young enough that our lives grew together instead of apart. By the time we got married, it felt less like a new chapter and more like a continuation of something solid, familiar, earned. We've been married almost 5 years now, and we have a 3-year-old daughter together. For most of our relationship, I believe we were a team in the truest sense. We grew up together. We survived bad apartments, bad jobs, bad years. We learned each other's rhythms. We argued, sure, but there was always a sense that we were standing on the same side of the line. That changed this past year. I finished law school and started a new job. The kind that looks great on paper but drains everything out of you in real life. Long hours, constant pressure, mentally exhausting. It pulled me out of the house more than I liked, but financially it helped us in a real way. I told myself this was temporary, that we were sacrificing now for stability later. Around that time, my wife started talking about something I wasn't prepared for. She said she felt like we had grown up together in a way that left parts of her unexplored, that we'd been together so long she'd never had the chance to experience life on her own terms. She framed it carefully, calmly, even gently. She talked about growth, about honesty, about how opening the marriage could actually make us stronger. At first, I shut down. The idea hit me like a threat, even though she didn't present it that way. But the more she talked, the more I tried to understand. I didn't want to be the husband who ignored his wife's feelings. I didn't want to dismiss something she clearly thought about deeply. So we started couples counseling. The sessions were uncomfortable, but productive until they weren't. One night, the conversation around opening the marriage exploded. Emotions ran hot. Voices were raised. Things were said that couldn't be unsaid. I walked out of that session shaken, questioning everything I thought I knew about our relationship. I spent days replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if my resistance came from fear rather than reason, wondering if love sometimes meant letting go of control. Eventually, I made a decision, not because I was comfortable, but because I wanted to try to grow instead of fight. I told my wife I was willing to discuss an open relationship, but I needed boundaries. I asked for 2 weeks before anything happened. We had a big family vacation coming up, and I wanted space, time to think, to breathe, to process. I suggested we bring the topic back to our counselor when we returned and figure out a plan together. She agreed. The vacation came and it was off. Nothing overt, no blow-ups, just distance, small things, less eye contact, less warmth. She felt like she was somewhere else, even when she was sitting right next to me. I told myself I was being paranoid. That stress does that to people. When we got back, we finally sat down and talked. We discussed boundaries. What was okay, what wasn't. Communication, honesty. It was a serious conversation, but it felt productive. For the first time in weeks, I felt a little grounded again, like maybe we were going to do this the right way, slowly, carefully, together. That night, after everything had settled, she asked me a question. She asked how I would feel if she went on a date that week. The timing hit me wrong immediately. We had just agreed on boundaries hours earlier. I told her I was confused, gently at first, asked how she could already have a date lined up when we'd barely finished talking. She hesitated, gave me an explanation that didn't quite make sense, said she had just downloaded a dating app earlier that day, that someone messaged her, that it moved fast. Something in my gut dropped. I pushed back, calmly at first, then more firmly. The timeline didn't add up. She went quiet. Then she cried. She admitted she downloaded the app a few days earlier. She said she just wanted to look, that she hadn't done anything, that she talked to someone, but it wasn't serious. My chest felt tight, but I wanted to believe her. Then the story changed again. She admitted she'd had the app for weeks, that she'd been flirting with multiple guys, that she'd already gone on a date, a full week before our vacation. That was the moment something broke inside me. All I could think about was how she sat across from me on that vacation, how cold she felt, how distracted. And suddenly it made sense. I asked to see her phone. She refused. She said nothing physical had happened, that it was just flirting, messages, pictures. She told me it was unfair to ask her to stop, that I had agreed to opening the marriage. She said she would stop after we talked to our counselor again. That answer terrified me, because it wasn't about stopping, it was about control, about already deciding where the line was without me, about rewriting the past few weeks like they were part of some agreement I never made. I told her she needed to delete everything. Right then, not later, not after counseling, now. She looked at me like I was asking something unreasonable. That was when I realized the open marriage hadn't started with a conversation. It had started without me. That's when I realized I wasn't part of the decision. The room went quiet after I told her to delete everything. Not the calm kind of quiet, the kind where you can hear your own heartbeat, where you suddenly feel very aware of how far apart two people can be while sitting in the same room. She didn't move. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't say yes or no. She just stared at me, like she was weighing something internally. And that hesitation told me more than anything she'd already admitted. I asked her again. She said she didn't think it was fair. That word, fair, stuck with me, because nothing about what was happening felt fair. Not the timing, not the secrecy, not the way the rules seemed to change depending on what benefited her in the moment. I reminded her that we had agreed to talk first, that we had agreed to boundaries, that she crossed those boundaries before they even existed. She said she felt trapped, that she didn't know how to bring it up, that she was afraid I'd shut it down if she waited. That answer hurt more than I expected, because it meant she didn't just make a mistake. She made a decision, one that assumed I was an obstacle, not a partner. That night, neither of us slept. I lay awake replaying every moment from the past few months, every late night at work, every time I told myself I was imagining the distance, every time I gave her the benefit of the doubt because 15 years of history felt heavier than suspicion. By morning, I felt hollow. We went to our counseling session a few days later, and the truth came out in pieces. Not all at once. Never all at once. I learned that she had emotionally detached long before she brought up opening the marriage, that the idea didn't come from curiosity alone, but from loneliness she never fully shared with me. The counselor asked her why she downloaded the app before we agreed on anything. She said she needed to feel wanted. I didn't know how to respond to that without sounding cruel, because I understood the feeling, but I couldn't understand the choice. Wanting validation didn't excuse deception. Needing attention didn't justify rewriting our marriage without my consent. The counselor talked about trust, about how open relationships only work when honesty comes first, not after. I watched my wife nod along, but something about her felt distant, like she was agreeing to the words, not the meaning. After that session, things didn't get better. They got quieter. She became guarded with her phone, protective in a way she never had been before. Even though she claimed she deleted everything, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in the aftermath of something I'd never been allowed to fully see. I started questioning myself. Was I overreacting? Was I being controlling? Was this my fault for being gone so much? That's the dangerous part of betrayal that doesn't look like betrayal at first. It makes you doubt your own instincts. It makes you negotiate with pain instead of confronting it. One night after putting our daughter to bed, I asked her directly if she regretted what she did. She paused again. She said she regretted how it made me feel. Not what she did, not the lies, not the secrecy, just the impact. That was when I finally understood something I had been avoiding. We weren't rebuilding trust. We were arguing over whether it mattered. I realized that even if she never opened another app, even if she followed every boundary moving forward, the damage had already been done. Because trust isn't just about what happens next. It's about knowing you weren't already left behind. I didn't feel cheated on in the traditional sense. I felt replaced before I even knew I was being replaced. And that's when the question stopped being about open marriage. It became about whether we were still in the same relationship at all. There wasn't a single moment where everything collapsed. No dramatic argument, no packed bags, no slammed doors. Just a slow, quiet realization that I was the only one still trying to hold something together. Days passed. then weeks. We existed in the same house, followed the same routines, parented the same child. On the surface, nothing looked different, but underneath there was a constant tension, like a conversation that never finished, like a truth that kept circling without landing. I noticed how careful I had become, careful with my words, careful with my reactions, careful not to trigger another discussion that would end with me feeling unreasonable for asking for honesty. I was walking on emotional eggshells in my own home, and I hated how quickly that started to feel normal. One night, I asked her a question I'd been avoiding. I asked her if she still wanted to be married to me. She didn't answer right away. That pause, longer than the others, told me everything before she spoke. She said she didn't know, that she loved me, but wasn't sure if the life we built still fit who she was becoming. She said she felt torn between stability and freedom, between family and individuality. I realized then that I wasn't competing with another man. I was competing with a version of her life that didn't include me. That night, I slept on the couch for the first time in our marriage. Not because we agreed to it, not because we fought, but because lying next to her felt lonelier than being alone. Over the next few weeks, I stopped trying to convince her of anything. I stopped defending my feelings. I stopped negotiating boundaries that only seemed to apply to me. And in that space, that silence, something unexpected happened. I got clarity. I realized I wasn't afraid of losing the marriage. I was afraid of losing myself inside it. I thought about the example we were setting for our daughter, about what it would mean to grow up watching two people stay together out of fear instead of choice. I thought about the version of love I wanted her to believe in, one rooted in respect, not endurance. I told my wife that I needed space, not as a tactic, not as leverage, but because I finally understood that you can't rebuild trust while questioning whether it matters to the other person. She cried. She asked if this meant the marriage was over. I told her I didn't know. And for the first time in months, that answer felt honest. We're still living in the same house for now, still co-parenting, still trying to navigate something neither of us planned for. There's no clean ending yet, no lesson wrapped in a bow. But there is one thing I know now. Agreeing to an open marriage didn't break us. Realizing I was already alone did. Time has a strange way of softening the sharpest edges without actually healing the wound. Weeks turned into months, and while nothing was officially decided, everything had already changed. We learned how to coexist. We coordinated schedules. We shared responsibilities. We spoke politely. On the outside, we probably looked like a couple doing the work, communicating, staying civil, holding it together for our child. But underneath that calm was a distance that never quite closed. We continued counseling for a while, not to fix the marriage, but to understand it. The conversation shifted from how do we move forward to what went wrong, and eventually to the hardest question of all, what does moving forward even look like now? Some days I felt steady, clear-headed. Other days, the smallest things brought everything back. A phone vibrating on the table, a look that lingered too long, silence where there used to be warmth. Trust doesn't shatter loudly. It erodes quietly, one unanswered question at a time. I stopped asking to see her phone, not because I trusted her again, but because I realized trust doesn't come from access. It comes from knowing someone wouldn't make you ask in the first place. That understanding hurt more than the betrayal itself. There were moments I caught myself wondering if things could have been different, if I had been home more, if I had noticed sooner, if I had reacted differently when she first brought it up. That kind of thinking is seductive because it offers the illusion of control. But eventually, I had to accept a harder truth. Loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing your sense of reality to keep them comfortable. I still don't hate her. That surprises people when I say it out loud. She's the mother of my child. She's someone I shared most of my life with. I believe she was honest about her feelings, just not about her actions. And that distinction matters. What I've learned is this: openness without honesty isn't freedom. It's abandonment disguised as growth. Boundaries don't exist to restrict love. They exist to protect it. And once those boundaries are crossed in secret, they don't magically reappear because someone apologizes. I don't know what the final outcome of our marriage will be. Maybe we'll find our way back to something real. Maybe we won't. But I do know this. I will never again agree to a version of love that requires me to disappear. Because the moment I stopped fighting to be heard was the moment I started listening to myself. And that changed everything. If you're still here, thank you for listening. Stories like this take time to tell, and there are many more coming. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing to Fractured Fidelity. And if you've lived through something similar or saw the ending differently, you're not alone. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time.